It is 7:30 on an August evening in Bloomington, Minnesota, and we have about an hour of good light left. A few minutes from this spot, thousands of people are wandering the largest enclosed shopping mall in the United States. But this trailhead has no chalet, no nature center, and no pavement. There is just a small parking lot and a mowed turf path disappearing into a wall of oaks and maples. This is Tierney's Woods, one of the quietest corners of the entire Twin Cities park system. Come walk it with us before the sun goes down. Bloomington sits on the southern edge of the Twin Cities, on the north bank of the Minnesota River. Nearly 90,000 people live here, in a city most travelers know only for its giant mall and its airport hotels. But the western and southern edges of town tell a different story. Out here, the land rises into wooded glacial hills, and roughly a third of the city is given over to parks and river wetlands. Tierney's Woods sits in those hills on West Bush Lake Road, pressed against the boundary of Hyland Lake Park Reserve. It is the quiet side of a very busy city. The first thing you notice here is what is missing. There is no asphalt and no boardwalk, just under 2 miles of mowed turf trail winding through the trees. The Park District keeps this place deliberately simple, open from 5 in the morning until 10 at night, with dogs welcome on a 6-foot leash. Grass underfoot changes the whole feel of a hike. Your steps go quiet and the woods get loud. Right next door lies one of the most visited outdoor destinations in the Twin Cities. Hyland Lake Park Reserve anchors a chain of parkland around Hyland, Bush, and Normandale lakes that covers more than 2,500 acres. Over there you will find nearly 18 miles of hiking trails, a nature center, a paddling lake, and even a downhill ski area. Tierney's Woods is the overflow-free annex to all of that. Same hills, same forest, almost none of the crowds. Hikers who want the woods to themselves slip in here. And these little woods make you work. The turf trails take some genuinely steep climbs, rolling up and over hills and dipping through shaded ravines. It is a surprising amount of relief for a city that most people picture as flat suburbia. Every one of these slopes is asking a question. Where did all this up and down come from, this close to the prairie flatlands? The answer is ice. During the last ice age, this ground lay beneath a sheet of glacial ice, part of the great lobes that pushed down across Minnesota. When the climate warmed a little over 10,000 years ago, the ice did not retreat neatly. It stalled, melted, and dumped its cargo of sand, gravel, and boulders in heaps. Those heaps are the hills you are watching us climb. The hollows between them, where buried ice blocks slowly melted away, became the kettle lakes and marshes scattered across this corner of Bloomington. The melting ice also built something almost impossible to picture today. Along the northern edge of the continent, meltwater pooled against the shrinking ice sheet into glacial Lake Agassiz, a body of water that at its greatest extent was larger than all of today's Great Lakes combined. Around 13,500 years ago, that lake found a weak point in the ridge of debris holding it back. It overtopped the Big Stone Moraine on what is now the Minnesota and South Dakota border. The escaping water tore a gorge a mile wide through the moraine. Geologists call the breach traverse gap, and what poured out of it changed everything downstream. Hold that image while we walk this ridge. Somewhere south of these trees, beyond the edge of the forest, the land simply falls away into a valley far too large for the river inside it. Everyone who hikes the south rim of Bloomington eventually notices the mismatch. A modest, winding river sitting at the bottom of a canyon of green. The thing that carved that canyon no longer exists. Scientists call it Glacial River Warren. For roughly 3,000 years, it drained Lake Agassiz, a torrent that makes the modern Mississippi look tame. River Warren cut a channel up to 5 miles wide and 250 feet deep, running from Browns Valley southeast to Mankato, and then northeast past the future site of the Twin Cities. When Lake Agassiz finally found new outlets to the north, the great river simply shut off. It left behind an enormous empty trench across southern Minnesota. Bloomington's entire southern boundary runs along the rim of that trench. So this evening hike is really a walk across a glacial dump pile, perched above the bed of a vanished river. The ravines we are dropping through are just the small print of that story, carved by little creeks working down toward the big valley. It is a lot of drama for a neighborhood woods, and it explains why the terrain here never lets you settle into a rhythm. The ice left nothing level. Today, the Minnesota River occupies only a small ribbon of the huge valley River Warren left behind. The river takes its name from a Dakota phrase, MNI-soda, often translated as cloudy water or sky-tinted water, and the state borrowed the name in turn. Where the ancient flood once roared, there are now floodplain forests, marshes, and quiet backwater lakes. The valley floor floods, dries, and floods again. That rhythm keeps it wild, even with a metropolis stacked along the rim. Back under the canopy, the light is starting to slant and turn gold. This is a proper hardwood forest, tall and closed overhead, dark at the floor. In late August, the woods feel almost tropical, humid and dense and buzzing. Minnesota's summers are short, and the forest seems to know it. Everything here is growing as hard as it can. The trees around us are the classic hardwoods of southern Minnesota, oaks and sugar maples with basswood and elm mixed through. Forests like this once ran in a broad band across the south-central part of the state, a country of continuous hardwood shade that French-speaking traders knew as the Grand Bois, the Big Woods. Settlement converted almost all of it to farmland and later to suburbs. What survives? Survives mostly in parks, in scraps and patches like this one. That is part of what makes an unassuming woods in Bloomington worth protecting. It is a remnant of something that used to go on for miles. The trail keeps trading hilltops for hollows, and some of those hollows hold water. Wet pockets like this one are gold for wildlife, especially on the edge of a dry late summer. The Park District tells visitors to keep their eyes open out here, and the advice is warranted. A quiet turf path at dusk is about the best wildlife blind there is, so we walk softly and watch the shadows. Evening is when a Minnesota woods changes shift. White-tailed deer drift out of the thickets to browse the trail edges. Barred owls start calling from the big oaks, and woodpeckers hammer out a last round before dark. Raccoons and foxes take over the paths that hikers are leaving. None of these animals need wilderness exactly. They need cover, water, and a little peace, and a place like Tierney's woods, buffered by the big reserve next door, gives them all three. It is worth remembering how unlikely this hour of quiet is. We are hiking inside a metropolitan area of well over 3 million people. The freeway hum never quite disappears, and jets out of the international airport cross the sky. And yet the trail ahead is empty, and the light in these trees is as good as any national park. So how did a booming suburb end up with woods like this? That story starts with a log cabin. In 1843, Peter and Louisa Quinn built a cabin along the Minnesota River, the first European settlers to live in what became Bloomington. The Quinns came to a river landscape at the very edge of the young nation's reach, days of travel from anywhere. Within a few years, other families followed and took up land along the valley. They found rich soil on the old glacial deposits, timber in the ravines, and a river for moving goods. The pattern of the next century was set in those first claims: farms above the bluffs and the wild valley below. Some of the oaks in these woods are old enough to connect the eras. A bur oak can stand for centuries, which means the largest trees here may have been saplings when settler wagons first cut ruts through the county. They survived the axe, the plow, and the bulldozer, mostly by luck of location. Steep, lumpy ground is hard to farm and expensive to build on. In the end, the same glacial hills that make this hike a workout are the reason there is a hike here at all. The settlers organized their new community and named it Bloomington, after the Illinois town many of them had left behind. The township incorporated in May of 1858, the same month Minnesota became a state, with a recorded population of just 25 residents. Early Bloomington ran on farming, blacksmithing, and flour milling, the standard toolkit of a Minnesota River town. Growth came slowly at first. By 1880, the town counted about 820 people. For decades after that, Bloomington stayed what it had always been, a farm community on the road between Minneapolis and the river crossings. Walking here, you can still read that farm era in the land if you look closely. Old fence lines, field edges grown back into forest, the odd apple tree far from any orchard. Second growth woods keep their history in plain sight. Then, in the span of a single generation, everything about this place changed. The city arrived all at once. After the Second World War, the Twin Cities burst outward, and Bloomington stood directly in the path. Between 1940 and 1960, the population multiplied 9 times over, as cornfields turned into curving streets and ramblers. In November of 1960, Bloomington formally became a city. It would go on to host Major League Baseball and football at Metropolitan Stadium and grow into one of the largest cities in the state. Growth on that scale usually erases every acre of wild land in its way. Around here, remarkably, it did not. The reason we can film this tonight is that some people in the 1950s looked at the building boom and got nervous. They could see the metro area sprawling outward, and they did the math on what would be left when it finished. The wild places were going to be gone before anyone thought to save them. So Hennepin County decided to buy land while land could still be had. That decision is the quiet hero of this entire episode. In 1957, the state authorized what was then called the Hennepin County Park Reserve District, an agency with one job: to acquire and protect big blocks of natural land ahead of the bulldozers. In 2001, it took its current name, Three Rivers Park District, for the three rivers that receive its watersheds: the Mississippi, the Minnesota, and the Crow. Today, the district manages over 27,000 acres across 20 parks and a web of regional trails. Nearly 7 million visits happen on that land every year. It is one of the great quiet successes of American suburban planning. What makes the district unusual is a rule written into its park reserves. At least 80% of a park reserve must be kept in, or restored to, its natural state, with development limited to 20% of the land at most. Ball fields, chalets, and parking lots have to squeeze into that 1/5, and the rest stays forest, prairie, and marsh forever. Smaller holdings like Tierney's woods sit even further along the wild end of that spectrum. Here, the developed footprint is essentially one gravel parking lot. Everything else is left to the oaks. Once you know the 80% rule, you see it everywhere on this hike. It is the reason the trail is grass instead of blacktop, and the reason the only structures out here are trail markers. It is also why the transition from mall parking lot to deep forest takes about 10 minutes in this city. Policy is invisible, but you can walk on its results. This turf path is what a good decision feels like underfoot. The showpiece of that policy sits just across Bush Lake Road. Hyland Lake Park Reserve pairs its forests with restored tallgrass prairie, big sweeps of bluestem and wildflowers threaded with trails. Richardson Nature Center runs programs there year-round, and the reserve offers 84 acres of water for paddling and an accessible fishing pier on Hyland Lake. In winter, the same hills groom out into miles of cross-country ski trails. If Tierney's Woods is the quiet chapel, Hyland is the cathedral. Most hikers here use both. And those hills next door hide one of the strangest facts in Minnesota sports. Remember, the vertical relief around here is entirely glacial, just heaps of ice age gravel. Total elevation change, under 200 feet. Out of that modest terrain, this park system built a downhill ski area with a national reputation. It is a very Minnesota kind of miracle. The story began in the 1940s with a modest rope tow operation called Normandale Ski Hill, which struggled through drought years and hard times. The Young Park Reserve District acquired the hill, rebuilt it, and reopened it as Hyland Hills. It offers about 175 feet of vertical drop, which serious ski towns would consider a bunny slope. Yet with intensive snowmaking, grooming, and lights for skiing every night, it became a training ground for racers who compete at national and Olympic levels. Roughly 160,000 visits a year happen on that one small hill. Glacial gravel plus stubbornness equals a ski area. Down below Bloomington's bluffs runs an even bigger conservation story. In 1976, after citizens fought off development plans for the valley, Congress established the Minnesota Valley National Wildlife Refuge. It protects some 14,000 acres strung along roughly 70 miles of the river, one of just 14 priority urban wildlife refuges in the country, with a visitor center a few blocks from the Mall of America. Around 250 bird species pass through the valley in a year. One refuge unit once held Minnesota's largest great blue heron rookery, more than 600 nests crowded into the floodplain trees. All of it sits directly downhill from the trail we are walking. The light is nearly gone now, and the woods are switching over to the night crew. An evening hike here ends the way the best short trips do, with the strong sense that you got away with something. 30-some minutes of climbing through real forest, owls tuning up overhead, and not a turnstile or a ticket in sight. The city is still out there, humming beyond the trees. In here, it is simply evening in the woods. Here is the fact worth carrying home from Bloomington. Since 1992, this city has hosted the largest enclosed shopping center in the United States, with more than 500 stores under one roof. The same city keeps about a third of its land as parks, wetlands, and river valley. Both things are true at once, a monument to consumption and a masterpiece of restraint, sharing one municipal border. Tierney's woods, small and unpaved and easy to miss, is the restraint side of that ledger. Every metro area has a mall, but very few still have woods like this. So that is Tierney's Woods, a turf path over Ice Age hills, above the bed of a vanished river in the shadow of a famous park and a more famous mall. If you visit, come at the edges of the day, bring nothing, and let the quiet do the work. The parking lot is small, the trail is short, and that is exactly the point. Some places earn their keep by staying simple. Thank you for watching. Follow for more of the trails of the world.